Today's video does cover some topics that some viewers may find sensitive, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you'd like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. And Happy New Year's, you beautiful people. I used to work for a decent-sized pizza chain as a delivery driver, and let me tell you, it was probably the craziest time of my life. For the most part, the job was decent, but there were absolutely some nights where things were completely out of hand. Our location was in the middle of a suburb that was just outside of both a nice part of town and a part of the town that was mostly inhabited by students that attended the local college. Obviously, the college part of town made most of the orders to our store, but they were also the worst tippers, which I understood. I don't expect the students to be swimming in money or anything, so I usually just accepted the dollar tip with a smile and told them to have a nice night. Anyways, considering the season, I wanted to submit one of my experiences from when I was delivering pizza on New Year's Eve. I worked the late night shift, and we closed at midnight, so we usually got out of there at about 1:30 in the morning, and I was always scheduled to work all the way up to the end of the shift. We actually expected a lot of orders because we anticipated a lot of parties or people at home celebrating. So they had scheduled 5 drivers on the shift that night. By about 11, we were completely dead, so they told 3 of the drivers to go home, leaving just myself and one other driver who I could honestly say was probably the most worthless employee at that store. Not to go too far into an aside, but she was the store manager's daughter, and she had her dad's passcode for the computer system, so she constantly assigned deliveries to other drivers and pretty much never took them. And she did this with his account. Obviously, I wasn't a fan of hers, but neither here nor there. So, every time a delivery came in, it was assigned to me, which was nothing short of annoying as hell, but at least most of the people were being good about tips, which was nice. But then, I got assigned a double with one order that was already 15 minutes late, and one that was just about to be late. She seriously handed it to me as I walked in from another delivery, and when I asked her why she hadn't taken it, her response was that her back was hurting so she couldn't do deliveries that night. I rolled my eyes and took the order, and made my way to the first house. This was actually the delivery that turned into the event. I pulled up and noticed that the outside of the house was really dark. The only reason I knew it was the house was because of the mailbox out at the street side. I parked the car and grabbed the order, prepping to apologize to the person that answered the door for being so late. I knocked, and as I did, the door actually kind of fell open, like it wasn't latched. I just kind of stood there staring into the room thinking, yeah, this is how horror movies start. I pushed the door open a bit more and announced who I was, literally saying, "Hey, it's my name from Pizza Place. I have a delivery order for a Todd." I just stood there waiting for someone to show up and take this pizza, thinking to myself that if no one came to the door after 2 more minutes, I would just take it back to the store and tell them to call the customer, and basically tell them that we attempted a delivery but nobody answered. I announced myself one more time, saying that I would have to take the pizza back to the store if they didn't come to the door within a couple seconds. Within those couple seconds, I saw something that actually scared me more than anything I expected. A little girl, no older than 2 or 3 years old, came around the corner and walked straight up to me. I was beyond confused on what exactly I was supposed to do in this case, mostly because this kid, from what I could tell, was unattended. Though I was thinking that there was a possibility that maybe her parents were just asleep or not in this main part of the house. she looked up at me and reached over to my hand, grabbed it and pulled on it, basically pulling me into the house. Now, when looking back at this situation, it's easy to say something like, "Oh, you should have left and called the cops," or whatever, but I was standing there, being pulled in by this child to a home that looked empty, holding a pizza for someone named Todd, and at that moment, I had no time to really think about what exactly I should be doing. I just basically let this little kid pull me into the house. And as terrifying as this situation is, I'm glad that I went with her. She pulled me into the living room and then further into the dining room, where I saw a man unconscious on the floor. As soon as I ran over to the man on the floor, the little girl started audibly crying and watching me as I tried to do whatever I could think to do to see if this man was even alive. Of course, I'm not a medic. I was just a pizza delivery driver, and I was being driven by adrenaline, and this little girl was just staring at me. At this point, I actually remembered that I had a cell phone, and I pulled it out to call 911. I told the woman who I was, and that there was an unconscious man in the house that I was delivering to, giving her the address, and she walked me through some of the things to see if he was alive. Thankfully, he was. He was actually breathing, albeit very shallow. They told me that the medics were on the way, and for what felt like forever, I was just sitting there on the phone with the dispatcher waiting and trying to make small talk with the little girl to keep her calm. I told her that he was going to be okay, and that they were coming in to help him. She just nodded and sat there beside me. It was scary, and kind of awkward to be honest, and I really felt bad for this little girl. I was actually pretty upset that this man and his daughter were having to deal with this on New Year's Eve, when I'm guessing he was just waiting for the pizza to show up. That is, unfortunately or fortunately, the end of the story for me. The medics were able to take control of the situation and get everything taken care of. They got a hold of the man's family and got him onto an ambulance and to the hospital. I did have to talk to the police that showed up as well, mostly because it was a bit suspicious that I was in a random person's house and that they were unconscious. But, thankfully, they decided that I had nothing to do with it and just took my information. I have no idea what happened to him, why he was unconscious, or anything like that. I did have to take their order back to the store because I obviously couldn't have left it there, and the ticket was a cash ticket anyways. I took the other delivery to the next house and went back to the store, and thankfully that was our last batch of deliveries for the night, because I was mentally drained. I really do hope that that man was okay, and that the hospital got him taken care of. That was one of the worst nights working on that job for me, and on New Year's at that. And it was actually pretty close to the time that I left the job. Mostly because I was a bit tired of all the excitement. Every year, my neighbor, Hugh, throws his New Year's party for the block. I will say that he is adamant that kids are not allowed, as there is alcohol involved and something always ends up happening to make the party crazy. It's typically in a good way, though. No injuries, fights, or cops being called, but they can get into some pretty wild things. So, needless to say, and that is always my choice of plans for New Year's, and 2018 was no different. I brought wine and a cheese board that Hugh always enjoyed and insisted that I make. At some point during the party, I was talking to Hugh and a few others when his wife, Chandra, approached him and whispered in his ear. I watched as his normal smiling face slowly faded into one more of concern. He quickly smiled again and excused himself from our group. I watched as he walked away, and towards the entryway where the door was. I continued to talk with the others for a few before my curiosity got the best of me, and I excused myself as well. I headed to the kitchen island where the drinks are. As you could see the entryway from there, which is where I spotted Hugh talking with a guy that looked exactly like him, as if they could be twins. I was conflicted on if I should approach them because Hugh had more of a crossed look while the guy he was talking to was smiling and kind of waving back and forth to the music that was playing. Not long after, the guy patted Hugh on the shoulder and walked off. Hugh stood there for a few seconds before we made eye contact and walked over smiling. I tried to pretend that I had just gotten there and didn't see much of what happened, but he could see right through me, so he briefly explained. Apparently, the guy that he was talking to was actually his twin brother, Leo. He hadn't seen his brother in several years as they didn't get along very well, and he had moved away. He said this in good faith, asking to keep an eye out, because if he did anything remotely wrong or inappropriate, he wanted to know, as to have a reason to make him leave. I told him that I understood and would let him know, but that he should try to have a good time as this was the party of the year for our little block. And he agreed. For the next couple of hours, everything seemed to be fine until Leo finally made his way to me over by Chandra's plate collection. She had a display of all the state plates and even some countries that they had visited. I was just browsing over them when I heard someone ask, "Have you ever been?" I turned to see Leo behind me holding a bottle of something. I asked for clarification, and he started talking about a specific country. I don't want to mention it for Hugh's privacy, but he said that that's where they were actually born until they moved to the US, and that they had dual citizenship with their parents. He talked about some things that he enjoyed there, and how he wished he could go back. I was trying to be friendly and stay optimistic, and I made a comment about how you should always try to do what makes you happy. He seemed to appreciate it, and hugged me with one arm as he continued to drink his liquor. I could tell by his swaying and slurring that he was definitely intoxicated, but he still hadn't done anything bad, so I let him be on his way. We were getting close to midnight at this point. I think maybe 15 to 30 minutes to go. Chandra was passing out the poppers and talking with everyone, and I saw Leo in the back hallway, heading into the bathroom. Again, I was just keeping tabs on this guy, but also continuing to have a good time. We gathered around the TV to get ready for the countdown, and all together, we welcomed in the new year, and did some celebratory drinks. At this point, I had actually forgotten about Leo, and was carrying on a conversation with someone in the living room. But that's when I started smelling smoke. I asked the guy that I was talking to, and he agreed that there was definitely something burning. I went around to the stove and saw nothing there, but then I saw Hugh quickly coming down the stairs looking alarmed. I asked him about the smell, and he also had no idea, but he asked me if I had seen Leo. I told him the last time I saw him was before midnight, and that he had just gone to the bathroom. He then made a mad dash to the bathroom, saying something that I couldn't make out, and was banging on the door and yelling for Leo to open it. I decided to follow him in case anything happened, as I didn't know Leo, and I didn't know what he was capable of. As I stood at the end of the hallway, I saw the bathroom door fly open, and the look on Hugh's face changed to one of confusion. Leo stepped out in what I assume was one of Chandra's dresses. He had shaved or cut a lot of his hair off, and was wearing makeup. I also want to assume that he had lipstick on his arms and head instead of blood, but I'm pretty sure that was wrong. As he swung the door open, he yelled, "Happy New Year's, brother!" and slammed into Hugh, shoving them both into the door across the hallway, which was his office. I then quickly noticed the smoke coming out of the bathroom and was freaking out, trying to decide what to address first. I yelled for Chandra to call 911 and quickly ran to the bathroom to see something in the tub on fire. I quickly looked around and saw nothing else, so I turned on the shower and then ran after the brothers. Leo was on top of Hugh, but I noticed the razor in Leo's hand, and Hugh was trying to hold it back. Thankfully, I was able to pull his arm back too, making it easier for Hugh to grab it. Then, I dragged Leo backwards to get him off Hugh. Thankfully, we were able to subdue him until the cops showed up. The whole time he was spouting off different things that made no sense, as well as talking in another language. I apologized to Hugh later about calling the authorities, as I kind of felt that I had overstepped, but he thanked me for it. After it was all said and done, they had arrested Leo, and they offered to take Hugh to get him checked out, but he refused, as there were still many people there and he wanted to pick the party back up so that it didn't end like that. I then helped him look over his bathroom, and noticed that Leo had set his clothes and some of his belongings, like his wallet, on fire. We cleaned it all up, and then tried to get the party back into full swing, and for the most part, we were able to. It was a few days after the party that I was back over there, helping Hugh shovel his driveway when he explained a bit more about his brother. Leo apparently had issues with drugs, and he had been bailed out on multiple occasions by their mother. He finally cut ties when he moved back in with his mom, only to rob her shortly after and sell all of her stuff, including many things from their grandparents in their home country. He was incarcerated at the time and was locked up for several years, and when he showed up to the party, he had only been out for a couple of months. He definitely was not supposed to be there that night. Unfortunately, he did, and he apparently had plans. He had told him, in their other language, that he needed to die as he was the reason that his life was so miserable. He assumed that he was using again based on his actions, because he had no other explanation as to why he did what he did with the clothes and his hair. I was shocked to hear all of this because Hugh was always such a gentle giant that it was hard to believe he had a twin that was literally the complete opposite of him. Thankfully, I never saw or heard about him again, and I just hope that they never had to deal with it either. But it was definitely one of the more memorable New Year's, even if it was terrifying. And while I hope that I never meet Leo again, I do also hope that he got the help that he desperately needed. Last year, I finally got the courage to leave a very toxic, long-term relationship that I was in. My ex was very abusive and controlling, so when I came across a great opportunity to move across the country and in with my best friend, I took this as fate telling me to get out while I could, and for good. It has so far been the best decision I've made in a long time, but unfortunately it was followed up by some of my not-so-good decisions. The only person I knew at the time of me moving was my friend, Alex, that I moved in with. And she got me a job with her, and I slowly started to regain my confidence and become outgoing again. It didn't take me long to make friends with the other coworkers and people in the area, but I still found myself a little withdrawn, with not completely knowing the area very well. I tried my best to keep pushing myself out there, as this was my new life. This is where I wanted and where I wanted to be. So that's why I agreed to go to a New Year's party with Alex. It was a friend of hers that used to work at the company that we worked for, and she was hosting it at her house. I figured I would probably run into a few people I knew from work, or if nothing else, free food, drinks, and entertainment, right? When we got there, the party was already in full swing. There were several people creating their cliques and gathering in different areas of the house. Alex introduced me to her friend, and after chatting for a few, I drifted away to look around and to mingle. I walked out back to enjoy the nice air when I noticed there were a few yard games back there that people were playing. I walked up to the game of horseshoe and just watched a few people play, when one guy asked if I wanted to join. I shook my head no and told him that I was just watching, since I had never played horseshoe before. He looked surprised and quickly approached me from the side, and pushed me on my shoulder towards the line to join in. He handed me his horseshoes and started explaining to me the rules while someone else was throwing theirs. It seemed like a pretty easy concept, but when it was my turn, I did miserably. The other two people playing were kind and said that I did fine for a first-timer, whereas the guy that insisted I play teased me by making a comment that his dog could probably throw better. I took no offense to it, and we all just had a good laugh. After the game, I thanked them for letting me join and decided to walk back inside to grab another drink. While I was making myself a small plate of snacks, the same guy from earlier came up to me and started chatting with me again. He introduced himself as Evan and said that he used to work with the host as well, so I assumed that he worked at the same place I did at some point. I think at the time that was enough connection my buzzed brain needed at least. And we ended up finding a place in the living room and talked for most of the night about everything. I ended up telling him that I had moved here just a few months prior from out of state. I explained why I moved so far and even about my ex. Again, I think at this point I was just rambling, as I didn't really have anyone to talk about all of this other than Alex. And in my opinion, he was very kind and patient as he listened to me go on and on about my sad life, I'm sure. He told me that I did the right thing and mentioned how smart I was and how proud he was of me for doing what was best for me. I guess this really stood out to me because this complete stranger talked about how proud they were of me. And that wasn't something I had heard from someone in a very long time, so I was quickly in my feels. After some time of talking and choking back tears, we kind of stuck together and just had a great night. There were a few drinking games that were played, and then it got close to the countdown. I could agree that I probably had too much to drink, but Alex and I had taken an Uber here, so I knew that we wouldn't be driving anyways. That's probably what also gave me the confidence that night to do what I did. When it struck midnight, I grabbed Evan and kissed him to welcome in the new year and hopefully finally get past the year before and to move forward. Thankfully, he seemed okay with it too, and the rest of the night was a blast. Alex and I and a few other people ended up crashing there that night. I woke up on one side of the couch and noticed Alex and another girl on the other part of the couch. I laid there for a while due to being groggy and hungover, until Alex finally woke up too. After a slow start, we finally got up and around and headed home. Once home, I got a text from a number saved in my phone as Evan, with a heart emoji on it. It just said good morning, so without thinking about it too much, I replied. I was really liking him anyways, and I had no reason not to respond. He admitted to adding himself per my request, and I figured that I probably just didn't remember it because, well, alcohol. We actually ended up texting quite a bit and set up an actual date. I was pretty excited since I had been there for close to a year at this point, and this would be my first date since leaving my ex. I talked with Alex about this as she saw me with him throughout the night, but she said that she didn't recognize him and just assumed the same, that he was a friend of a friend. Later that week, we had our date, and it couldn't have gone better. We had so much in common, and I thought it was really cool whenever he asked me about allergies, because he didn't want to order anything that I could have a reaction to. I have a severe shellfish allergy, so I appreciated that he asked, and he even made a little joke about how he didn't have to worry about me ordering the lobster and then making him pay for it. Anyways, that night was fantastic, and he even drove me home so that I didn't have to pay for another Uber. Unfortunately, not long after that is when things started to change. We would go out together, but the conversation started changing. He started saying things that were all too familiar with my ex. It always seemed like it could be construed as sweet at first, but then it could easily go awry if you're not careful. He started saying things like, "I'm so glad that I met you. I don't know what I would do without you. You're the only thing that matters. We had only just started dating, and he seemed like he was already infatuated with me. I know that I was the one that probably started it with the kiss, but this was also how my ex was. We would get into a fight, me and my ex, him being both physically and verbally abusive, and when it was over, he would say things like that to me. So I started getting uncomfortable very quickly. I remember at one point he held my hand tightly in the restaurant. I excused myself and went to the restroom to try to stop myself from having a panic attack. Shortly after going in the restroom, he started texting me asking if I was okay. So I cut it short and went back to the table. I felt bad, but I told him I had to go as I really wasn't feeling well, and I insisted that I take an Uber so that he could still enjoy his meal. Of course, he refused, leaving it all behind, and followed me outside until my ride arrived and texted me all the way home. I just left them on red until I got home, and he texted me about making it home safe. I told him that I had just gotten home and went to bed for the rest of the night. The next day I talked to Alex about it, and she agreed that he seemed to get attached fairly quickly, and thought that it was probably a good idea to create some distance, and also to see how he would react, and that we should go and have a day together to try to get it off my mind. I didn't want to cause a fight or anything, so I told him that I was feeling better but that I was going to run some errands with Alex, and that I would let him know when I was done. He seemed perfectly fine with this. No questions asked, he just said to have a good time. So, that made me think that I was probably just overreacting. When we went out, I left my phone on the table so I didn't even have it with me. Nonetheless, we had a great day, but I came home to my phone being blown up. I still remember it. There was about 70 missed calls and text messages within 4 hours. And all from him. That's how long we were out. The messages started as a simple, "When are you guys leaving? Do you know what you're going to do?" But they quickly grew into, "Why aren't you responding or answering? Where are you? What are you doing?" And they were pretty much just repeated over and over, except for the voicemails where he was literally crying saying he didn't know what he did, but that he was sorry and he couldn't live without me. I called him, and before I could even explain that I had left my phone at home, he started calling me a liar and asked who I had at the house since I never left. I finally got the chance to explain to him that I had forgotten it at home, but that I had been out the whole time. As I was about to mention that I had proof that we were out, it dawned on me. We were now in the same territory that I had been in before, with me having to prove where I had been. So I hung up, and again had a bit of a meltdown. Thankfully, Alex was around to keep me calm, though. She was adamant that I call it off with him, as it obviously wasn't healthy behavior, and I agreed. But she then brought up something that I hadn't even really thought about. How would he have known that my phone never left our place? We thought maybe he was watching our place and never saw us leave, so he just assumed that I was still home. I didn't have a car, but Alex did, so we were in hers. It is a shared driveway with our neighbors, though, so maybe he thought that it was their car. I'm not sure. Regardless, it was still an unsettling thought that he could be watching. So, after ignoring him the rest of that day, I told him how I felt about his actions and said that we needed to call it off. After several comments and drastic changes in emotion, I ended the call. However, that didn't seem to be enough to convince him to leave me alone. He just happened to show up to places I was at, such as a grocery store, my work, the salon, and even a doctor's appointment. On one of these occasions, I told him that if he didn't stop, I was going to get a restraining order, to which he said something about it just being a coincidence and left. But something that did alarm me was one day when he messaged me and I would ignore it, He texted me telling me to stop playing a certain game and to respond to him. At that point, I had been playing a game on my phone. It wasn't something I brought up with him in the past, and I knew this because, for one, I'm not a big gaming person, and two, I had just downloaded this app recently, as Alex played it and we could play together. How would he have known that I was playing that at that exact time? I confronted him about it, and that's when he didn't respond for a while, and then finally just said, "I have my ways." This freaked me out. Again, this was my ex territory, and I told Alex about it. She was worried my phone may have had a tracker on it. Unfortunately, in my last relationship, I wasn't even allowed to have a password or lock on my phone. It had to be unlocked at all times, so he could access it whenever he wanted. I know that it was an unhealthy relationship, but some habits are still hard to break, and I still didn't have a lock on my phone at the time. That's when I remembered him adding himself to my phone at the New Year's Eve party, and thought that he could have very easily added something like that at that time. This was new territory for me, so not trusting my phone anymore, I called my mom from Alex's phone and told her that I had to get a new phone, and to contact me on hers until I did get a new one, and then I kept my phone off. To finish this off, Alex and I actually went and talked to a friend of hers in IT at work, and he looked at my phone. We did end up finding a GPS/location tracker, as well as a parental guide or remote watch thing on my phone. I assumed that he downloaded these at the party whenever he added himself. The guy said that I could just delete them, or potentially just format my phone if I wanted to, but just to be safe, I took the nuclear option. I went and got a new phone and number on Alex's plan since it was cheaper anyways. My old number was the number that I had while I was with my ex too, so it was probably just for the best. And just as expected, the coincidental run-ins stopped too. He couldn't call or text me anymore, but my Facebook was still there. He would send me message requests with pictures of me that I had taken. I guess he helped himself to my photo gallery too, probably sending them to himself and then deleting the messages. But I just ignored him. Slowly, the messages stopped there until he finally left me alone. I don't know if he found someone else to terrorize, and I hope not, but I'm just thankful that this one ended quickly. I didn't want it to consume me and run my life out here too. Oh, and I also found out more about Evan, in the sense that he had never worked at the same place as us. Alex asked her friend that had the party about him, and she said that he was actually her neighbor. She said that he never seemed weird or creepy to her, but would occasionally make comments about her being his girlfriend. But they were never like that with each other. She had only invited him to the party when he basically interjected himself, as she was bringing in the party supplies, and he noticed. She even mentioned that she stopped seeing him outside after the party and thought maybe he finally found himself another half, or a hobby. She apologized to me about it too, but not like she had anything to do with it, so no ill will towards her at all. Now she actually avoids going outside if she even sees him, and in case anyone asks, no, I'm done being crazy and spontaneous like that, and I decided it's probably just best to not date anybody for a few years. So that, my friends, was a collection of some creepy New Year's stories. Stories involving the New Year's Eve, however you want to look at it. Yeah. Some good stories this time around, as always though, right? If I'm not right, you're free to tell me, that's okay. Yeah, some good scary stories, good creepy stories. I did one of these last year, so this almost feels like an annual tradition, but with all respect, so do my Christmas and Thanksgiving ones, so, and Halloween and October. I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, because everything seems to just happen randomly here. But yeah, hopefully, you all enjoyed these stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, hit the subscribe button. If you want to leave me a comment down below letting me know what you thought, please do so. And yeah. So this, my friends, this video, this outro, wraps up 2022 for this channel, for me, for us, for all of this. And yeah, pretty decent year. Some hard times, and near the end here with getting sick constantly, COVID, the flu, whatever this thing in my lungs is now. Yeah. But 2023 will be a better year. It will be a much better year. We will continue to succeed. We will persevere. We will push forward and all that good stuff. All that jazz. And you like jazz. Not asking anymore, I'm telling. Anyways, friends, I hope you have a beautiful New Year's Eve. If it's already New Year's where you are, Happy New Year's Day. If it's not, Happy New Year's Eve. And I hope you have a great night and a great day. And of course, until I see you again, remember, on this first day of the year, technically day before the year ends, but again, for the first day of the year, start the year off remembering you are loved. You are important. You're valid. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And my friends, until next time, sleep well.